Hey guys, tonight we're heading to a city where the houses melt, the streets vanish with the rain, and the largest earthen building in the world is lovingly smeared with fresh mud every single year. You won't need a passport. Just close your eyes and imagine it's dawn. You're in Djenné, yes, with two ends, and the Sahel air is still cool enough to breathe without wincing. It won't last. Before you, rising like a sandcastle built by gods with exceptional symmetry, is the Grand Mosque. Clay spires crowned with ostrich eggs pierce the morning fog, their shadows long and slightly crooked, like fingers stretching over the waking town. There's no chanting, not yet, just the muted rustle of bare feet on packed earth and the sound of a goat complaining, somewhere off to the left, likely tied to someone's market cart. You hear a boy whistling. The breeze tastes like dust and mango leaves. You stretch, yawn, and rub sleep from your eyes. You're not dreaming, but you probably won't survive this festival with clean clothes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always lovely to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step closer to the mosque. Up close, it's not just big, it's surreal. The walls aren't flat, they breathe. Every surface is ridged with protruding wooden beams called Tehran, which stick out like handles. Some people claim they're for climbing. Others insist they are architectural braces. Historians still argue whether they were ever purely functional or symbolic, but right now they look like rungs on a divine ladder. And then someone hands you a bucket. It's half filled with sludge brown, wet, vaguely warm, and you're motioned toward a line of locals laughing and passing buckets from person to person, like a human conveyor belt. Someone says something to you in Bozo, or maybe Bambara. You nod politely. You have absolutely no idea what's going on, but you're now part of it. This is the crépissage de la Grande Mosquée, the annual mud plastering of Djenné's great mosque. You're not just witnessing it, you're officially involved. Behind you, the sun starts to stretch fully into the sky. That cool morning breeze gone, replaced by a wave of desert heat that makes your shirt stick in places you'd rather not discuss. But the work continues. Buckets arrive from the riverbank, filled with banco, a sacred mix of river mud, rice husks, and butter that somehow smells like hope and wet socks. Everyone's hands are coated in it. No one minds. Mainstream historical fact. The mosque you're plastering was first built in 1907, but it stands on sacred ground where at least two earlier mosques existed, one possibly dating back to the 13th century, when Djenné was already an Islamic stronghold in West Africa. But those dates can feel distant. What you feel now is the thump of buckets, the squish of mud underfoot, and the laughter of a teenage boy flinging banco like it's whipped cream. You duck, just barely. It hits the mosque instead of your forehead. Lucky. You pause a moment and glance across the plaza. There, women in vibrant wax-printed dresses are pounding. Millet kids are chasing a chicken that clearly does not want to be part of the festival, and someone's already selling tamarind juice out of an old tin kettle. Commerce doesn't stop for sacred duty. A fringe tidbit. Some say the mosque is replastered not just for preservation, but to keep the spirits happy. The building is alive after all. And you wouldn't let your grandmother's skin crack and peel without trying to moisturize it, would you? You take your turn at the wall, slathering the banco carefully into a crevice. It's warm. You try to smooth it with a trowel, then, with your hand, the wall seems to accept it, like skin drinking in lotion. A small boy next to you has no trowel, just a big grin and two mud-caked hands. He's faster than you, probably better too. A rooster crows from somewhere on the roof. That shouldn't be possible. But then again, this place defies logic. You look up again at the spires now, glowing in the full morning sun. The ostrich eggs glint faintly. Are they glass? No, they're real. Hollowed and symbolic, they're meant to represent fertility, purity, or eternity, depending on who you ask. You decide they represent cool hats and move on. Mud drips from your fingers. You're a mess. You're also oddly serene. You glance to the west. The Bonny River flows just beyond the town, low this time of year, but still shimmering like a long silver scarf tossed across the dunes. And in that moment, you realize this whole town, its architecture, its rhythm, its very breath is shaped by mud. Not carved from stone, not forged from metal, but built to erode and be remade again and again. You step back and admire your patch of wall. It's small a few square inches, but it matters. Every handprint does, and the day has barely begun. The bucket brigade doesn't stop, not even when the sun begins to press down like a thumb on a ripe mango. You pass another one along and blink sweat out of your eyes. Somewhere behind you, a boy shouts and trips. Mud flies. Everyone cheers. The rhythm of the morning settles into something ancient, something tribal, something distinctly fun. The line of bodies moves like a wave, slosh, step toss, slap. It's strangely soothing. No one barks orders. Everyone just knows what to do. There's joy in the repetition. Even the donkeys seem to nod along. You step aside for a moment and notice the mixture more closely. Banco, a glorious mess of mud straw and pulverized rice chaff. Some versions even include fish oil to help repel water. This particular batch smells like a mildly fermented smoothie. You briefly consider bottling it as a luxury face mask and selling it on Etsy. You'd call it Sahel Glow. As buckets keep moving, you follow a small group of boys down to the water's edge. They're scooping mud from the riverbanks and stomping it into giant wooden basins with bare feet, stomping, laughing, and occasionally throwing clumps at each other. You'd swear one of them just yelled goal. A girl maybe 10 years old grabs a double handful of straw and sprinkles it over a new batch like it's Parmesan cheese. She pats it down lovingly. It almost feels like cooking, like baking a city. Mainstream historical fact. This exact mixture, this sacred banco, has been used for centuries across the Sahel to build homes, palaces, and mosques. It's breathable, insulating, and astonishingly durable. If maintained, let it go for a year, the walls melt. Let it go for 5, the building disappears. Djenné doesn't endure because it was made from strong stuff. It endures because people keep remaking it. You head back toward the mosque, careful not to slip on the muddy path. That rooster is still somehow on the roof, probably judging you. A side alley catches your eye. You duck in, grateful for a sliver of shade, and discover a quiet moment. Here, 3 men kneel beside a cracked section of the mosque wall, inspecting it the way a doctor inspects an old scar. They're not hurrying. They press fingers into the crevice. Murmur. One of them taps it with a wooden spoon. They look like archaeologists, or witch doctors, or both. You wander closer and hear them debating something softly, what kind of patch this crack needs. More straw, less water, a finer clay. One of them insists the mud isn't listening today. Another nods solemnly. Historians still argue whether these traditional masons called beret ton are engineers, artists, or spiritual caretakers. Honestly, they might be all 3. Their methods are passed down orally, like songs or recipes. Each wall tells a slightly different story, and no one version is ever final. You step away before they notice you're eavesdropping. Back in the square, the crowd has grown. Now there are dancers near the well, drumming from a corner you can't see, and the distant clanging of metal bowls. Someone's making lunch. A man hands you a fried ball of something warm and spicy. It's millet-based, crunchy, slightly burnt, perfect. A fringe tidbit. In some versions of the festival, young men compete to be the fastest plasterer, scaling the mosque's spine barefoot, like it's a climbing wall, flinging mud with both hands, while balanced 10 meters off the ground. There are no safety harnesses. Only the Toron, the wooden beams jutting from the walls, serve as footholds. OSHA would weep. You glance up again. The sun is high now, and the mosque is changing color. Earlier it was soft and gray. Now drying in layers, it's morphing into a pale golden brown, like toast. The texture shifts too. Some patches look smooth as leather. Others are still visibly wet, dark, and glistening. It's like watching a skin heal in real time. A man beside you holds up a trowel like it's a sword. He wipes it on his pants. You both nod, warriors in the cult of preservation. A woman nearby is teaching her daughter how to throw mud at a wall with just the right flick of the wrist. The girl misses, hits the ground. They both laugh, then try again. You watch them for a moment and feel something that isn't quite nostalgia, because you've never done this before, but still feels oddly familiar. The mosque looms behind you, silent, watching, content. There's something about this ritual that doesn't feel performative. It's not done for tourists, though. A few have wandered into town blinking and red-faced. It's done because the walls must hold. The sun is unrelenting. The rains will come again. And the city will need to survive. You take another bucket, another step, another swipe of mud. The motion is becoming instinctive now. The line hums along beside you. A man starts to sing low and rhythmic. Others join in. You don't know the words, but the melody sways like the river back and forth, back and forth. Djenné is not a place of straight lines. It curves, it ripples, it breathes. You pause to wipe your hands now stained a permanent reddish brown. You feel proud, and a little ridiculous, and very much part of something bigger. A donkey brays, a child laughs, someone spills an entire basin of banco, and the crowd erupts in mock horror. Mud flies, you duck, again. Not fast enough this time, but honestly it's kinda nice. Cooling, maybe even sacred. You wander toward the edge of the square, letting the buzz of the crowd thin into something quieter. The mosque looms behind you now, massive and almost smug, like it knows it just got a fresh coat and is feeling fabulous. Your arms are streaked with drying mud. It's already cracking slightly at your elbows, like tiny fault lines forming on your skin. You rub at it, but there's no point. Djenné leaves a mark on you, whether you like it or not. A narrow alley leads you away from the central plaza. You follow it without thinking, ducking under laundry lines, and stepping over a row of chickens that seem to think they own the place. The buildings here lean inward, slightly made of the same earth as the mosque, warm smooth, and always on the verge of softening. You can't help but wonder what would happen if nobody came to replaster these homes. The answer is they'd vanish. That's the truth about Djenné. It's not built to last, it's built to be rebuilt. Every year, every time the rains come and wash away what stood before. Mainstream historical fact. Djenné was founded around 800 CE and has been continuously inhabited ever since. Its architecture is entirely earthen, not brick, not stone. Just soil shaped by hand and hardened by sun. And every single structure here needs regular care, constant rhythmic attention. A fringe tidbit. Some locals say if you don't tend to your walls, they'll sulk, refuse to stay upright. Let the jinn sneak through the cracks. So people sing while they work, not just to pass time, but to soothe the buildings. It's not superstition. It's emotional architecture. You round a corner and find a woman sweeping her doorstep with a bundle of palm fibers. The wall beside her has already been patched this morning, still wet to the touch. She smiles and offers you water from a calabash bowl. It's warm and slightly smoky. Possibly flavored with eucalyptus, possibly just river. You thank her and move on. The streets here aren't laid out in a grid. They curve and meander like goat tracks turned permanent. You stop to admire a tiny mud house with bright blue shutters just big enough to hold 2 goats and a shy grandmother. A painted sign above the door reads boutique. No further clarification. You pass another house, its doorway fringed with dangling bits of cloth and dry herbs. Maybe for luck, maybe for bugs. Historians still argue whether the decorations in Djenné homes are purely aesthetic or secretly medicinal. The walls here rise just taller than your head, thick and solid. But you know now that they're also fragile. You press your hand against one, warm, dusty, alive. Somewhere in the distance, a voice calls out instructions. Someone's organizing a new plastering team for the eastern minaret. The call bounces off the mud surfaces and echoes gently down the alley. Everything here seems to carry sound. Maybe that's how the city remembers itself. You circle back toward the mosque. From this angle, it looks less like a building and more like a natural formation, something grown from the ground rather than constructed. The towers look like termite mounds given divine intent. And that makes sense. Djenné is part of the landscape. It's not imposed upon it. The walls curve because wind curves. The materials melt because rain melts. It is the anti-fortress. You overhear 2 young men debating over how thick this year's banco layer should be. One swears it needs to be thinner so the sun can bake it faster. The other argues thicker is better, it cracks less. They throw hands in the air. Eventually they shrug and start mixing anyway. You stop to watch them stomp the mixture bare feet, churning straw into mud with a rhythm that would make any drum jealous. One of them starts humming a tune. The other rolls his eyes, then joins in. There's no blueprint here, just memory, intuition. Generational whispers passed from trowel to hand. You sit for a while at the edge of the square and let the movement wash over you. Children run past carrying buckets half their size. A group of women pass in brightly patterned wrappers, gossiping in a mix of French and Songhai. Someone near the river starts up a balafon melody, wooden keys tapping out a lullaby that the mosque seems to hum along with. The soundscape is hypnotic. Slosh, laugh, thump, scrape. You lean back against a wall carefully so as not to smudge it and take a breath. The air smells like earth and wood smoke. You feel like you're inside a living organism. A man passes by holding what looks like a giant wooden comb. You raise an eyebrow. He grins and explains it's a texture tool for decorating the upper surfaces of the mosque once the plaster is on. Not for beauty exactly, for grip. Rain needs something to hold on to before it drips away. Even water apparently likes traction. You consider that. Djenné isn't about resisting nature. It's about working with it. Everything from the sloped rooftops to the thick mud layers is designed to let time pass through the city, not over it. And that's the real reason this place survives. Not because it was built to last, but because it was built to change. The mosque casts a long shadow now. It stretches across the square like a protective hand. The bucket line slows slightly, fatigue beginning to show. Some people sit down. Others switch roles. A boy takes over for his uncle. A girl hands her trowel to her little brother. No one tells them to. They just know. And in that knowledge lies the soul of Djenné. The sun hovers higher now, flattening the color of the square into a palette of baked ochre and pale blue. The buckets keep coming, but you take a moment to wander off again, your curiosity tugging at you, like a small goat chewing your sleeve. You follow your nose this time. Something smells pungent. Earthy sour with a hint of something strangely familiar. You turn a corner, and there it is, a long trench of fresh banco being mixed by about a dozen people. Only this time, there's more going on than straw and river mud. A woman nearby is slicing open a dried fish with expert hands, dropping the oily innards into the mixture like she's seasoning a stew. You blink. Did that just happen? Yes. She adds a splash of what might be fermented millet water. Someone else tosses into ground baobab bark. And in the corner, a small gourd bubbles with what looks suspiciously like soap, but smells like spoiled mango. Welcome to the secret art of banco. Mainstream fact: banco isn't just mud and straw, it's a carefully balanced recipe of local ingredients, and the exact proportions vary, not just by town, but by neighborhood, even by family. The wrong mixture could cause walls to crack, mold, or collapse. This stuff is chemistry tradition and superstition in equal measure. You crouch beside the trench and dip a finger in. Warm, gritty, a bit slimy. You resist the urge to sniff it again. Barely. A man beside you offers an explanation in slow, deliberate French. Ce n'est pas juste la boue, he says. C'est une mémoire. It's not just mud. It's a memory. He stirs it with a flat paddle, scooping from the sides and folding the mixture inward like dough. You ask how long he's been doing this. Depuis toujours, he shrugs. Since forever. A fringe tidbit. Some of the older Masons believe that certain banco blends can protect against snakes' evil eyes and even betrayal. One especially famous mix used only for mosque repairs is rumored to contain traces of crocodile bile. No one will admit who brings the bile, but it always shows up. You watch them apply the fresh blend to a cracked pillar of the mosque. The mud clings like frosting. It glistens for a moment, then begins to mat as the sun bakes it. A woman uses a flattened calabash to smooth it down her palm, following in hypnotic circles. The motion is as elegant as any painter's stroke. It's almost a performance. But there's no applause, only nods. Nearby, a group of girls in bright yellow wrappers is dancing in a semicircle while they wait their turn at the wall. Their feet raise little clouds of dust, and someone begins to clap along. You sit cross-legged, letting the rhythm seep in. From this angle, the mosque looks even more surreal. The repeating Toran beams give it the texture of some ancient bristling sea creature, a mud kraken frozen mid-roar. You can't tell if it's beautiful or terrifying. Both, maybe. You catch sight of a man carefully applying banco to one of those beams using a tiny tool no bigger than a spoon. His hand is rock steady, his face serene. You wonder how many times he's done this. 100, 1,000. You start to ask, but he gently shakes his head and keeps working. Some answers don't need words. Historians still argue whether this annual ritual is more about religion, architecture, or community cohesion. But standing here watching these people repair their town, one handful of mud at a time, the answer feels obvious. It's about all of them bound together by repetition. You notice now that some of the mosque's lower walls have faint carvings, barely perceptible, unless the light hits them just right. Decorative flourishes. Names. Maybe dates. You run your fingers across one and it crumbles ever so slightly. not enough to damage, just enough to remind you this is temporary. Djenné is always in the act of becoming. A young boy nearby shows you how to make a miniature banco brick. He shapes it with practiced hands no older than 10, but already an artisan. He sets it in the sun beside a row of others, all lined up like brown sugar cubes. You tell him they're beautiful. He shrugs like it's no big deal. It is. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, not loud, but clear. Time to change teams. The men on the west wall hand their tools to the next shift, walk off with tired shoulders and brown streaked faces, and are immediately handed cups of water and tiny parcels of rice and okra wrapped in leaves. You join them. The rice is sticky and lemony. The okra is aggressively slimy. You love it. Sitting there, chewing in slow satisfaction, you take in the scene. The sun nearly overhead now makes everything shimmer. The freshly plastered sections of the mosque glow slightly like someone whispered gold into the mud. You glance down at your own hands. They're caked, cracked, sticky with remnants of banco rice and sweat. But they feel useful. Remembered. A donkey walks past with two boys riding bareback, both covered head to toe in mud and grinning like they've discovered flight. One of them salutes you. You salute back. You've become part of this place, even if just for a day, and Djenné has become part of you. The singing starts again, low rhythmic rising in the heat. You don't understand the words, but you don't need to. By dawn, the mosque has changed color again. The banco dries to a pale ochre in the morning light, soft like sand but proud like stone. You stretch your arms, still sore from yesterday's bucket relay, and squint up at the towering facade. The ostrich eggs atop the 3 minaret peaks catch the sunlight glowing faintly, like someone lit 3 modest lanterns for the sky to find. The town is already awake. Women are kneading dough. Boys chase goats with the casual chaos of daily life. And in the main square, there's something different today music. A pair of balafon players begin their melody while seated beneath a neem tree, wooden mallets tapping out a rhythm that makes your chest feel like it's purring. One of the mosque's oldest walls seems to echo the sound. Or maybe that's just how this place works. Everything reflects everything else. You follow the music toward the open plaza, where today's task is different. It's not about slapping mud anymore. It's about honoring it. Today is the ceremony. Mainstream historical fact. The crépissage de la Grande Mosquée is not just maintenance, it's also a festival, one of the few civic rituals in the world that mobilizes an entire town annually for the sole purpose of keeping a mud building alive. It's a blend of construction site parade ground and community potluck. A fringe tidbit. There's a legend that the original builder of the first mosque received the design in a dream, complete with instructions to use specific mud from a specific bend in the Bani River. Whether or not the story's true, people still collect banco from that exact spot just in case. Today, children run along the mosque's lower platforms, their laughter ricocheting off the walls like birdsong. Some carry small trowels and pretend to work. Others just roll in the dust for fun. There's no rush, no pressure, only the glow of something just finished and well-loved. A group of women begin to sing their voices, weaving into the rhythm of the balafons. The song is not in French or Arabic, but in a local tongue, maybe Bozo, maybe Fulani. It doesn't matter. You catch the word baraka repeated several times. Blessing. You find yourself at the edge of a long, low table covered in bowls of food. There's to, a dense millet paste that requires some wrist strength and a sense of culinary adventure to eat. There's grilled fish wrapped in leaves, smoky and tender. There's sweet ginger juice and reused soda bottles. Someone hands you a bowl and you realize this is your reward. This and the mosque still standing. You take your food to a shaded patch of wall and sit with a few others. No one talks much, just quiet chewing, shared nods, the occasional smile. You glance again at the mosque, now still. The bucket lines are gone. The laughter has softened. A slow breeze nudges the hanging cloth banners that flutter from the minarets. You get the sense that the building is resting. You stand and wander around its base. From up close, the wall surface is still drying, some patches drier, then others creating a mottled camouflage of moisture and dust. You touch it. It's firm now. Set. A few spots are still faintly warm. And it strikes you again, this building is not just made of earth. It's made of attention, and effort, and time. Historians still argue whether this ritual began purely for religious reasons, or whether it started as a necessary civic duty that later took on spiritual meaning. But at some point, the line between sacred and practical blurred. Maybe that's the secret. Maybe it always blurs. You find a cluster of older men seated on woven mats near the mosque's eastern wall. They're griots, oral historians murmuring stories to a small group of children. You sit near enough to listen. One of the men points toward the mosque's peak. They say if the eggs fall, he says in Bambara, the river will come and take us all. The children gasp. One of them looks up nervously. You do too. The eggs remain perfectly still. Probably glued, but still. The griot continues tales of previous festivals of years when the banco mixture didn't hold of one season, when the rains came too early and the plaster melted back into the ground. He speaks of repairs made at night under lanterns while the town held its breath. Another fringe detail. In 1988, parts of the mosque did begin to crumble just slightly. The outer pillars sank a few centimeters and cracks spidered across one facade. It wasn't sabotage, just neglect. That year, the festival had been delayed. People still whisper that it was a warning. You look now and see no cracks, no crumbles, just a seamless stretch of care. Someone strikes a tam-tam drum from the other side of the plaza. The balafons pick up again. The air smells like roasted peanuts and incense. A woman balances a clay jar on her head, gliding through the crowd like a leaf on water. She's not in a hurry. No one is. Even the light moves slowly here. You return to your seat under the neem tree. A small girl offers you a flat disc of fried millet bread. You accept. It's chewy, a bit sweet, and leaves your fingers oily. You lick them without shame. You've earned it. As the afternoon rolls toward evening, the shadow of the mosque grows again, longer, cooler, reaching across the plaza, like it's gathering everyone in for a nap. You lie back on the hard-packed earth arms folded behind your head. Above you, the sky fades into the same dusty pink as the banco walls. And for a moment, there's no difference between you, the mud, and the city. You're all part of the same thing. The sun finally dips below the western rooftops, and Djenné exhales. You can almost hear it, that collective sigh that settles over the square like a light wool blanket. The plaza empties little by little, not all at once. It's not a dismissal, it's a fade-out. Even the chickens seem to know it's time to head home. You wander slowly. The streets are golden now, the kind of gold that only comes at dusk in the desert, warm, rich, almost syrupy. The shadows stretch like sleepy cats. The walls, still drying in places, cast their own reflections of themselves. It's easy to get lost here, not because the town is big, but because time unspools differently in its alleys. Then you hear something strange. A voice. Not singing, not talking, chanting. You follow it. It leads you to a flat rooftop, where a group of women are working by the last light of day. They're smoothing banco onto a small wall, singing in low harmony, their song a hypnotic blend of breath and hum. One holds a bowl of paste in her lap, her hands moving like she's washing the surface, not building it. The chant isn't for you. You're not even sure it's for the mosque. It's for the clay. You climb the last few steps and sit on the edge quietly. No one tells you to leave. You recognize one of the women from the festival, her dress still caked at the hem with yesterday's work. She looks over, once smiles, then keeps singing. Mainstream historical fact. In many parts of Mali, women have traditionally been the plasterers of domestic spaces, their hands believed to hold not just skill, but blessings. In Djenné, this role expands to the sacred women maintain the interior walls of the great mosque, even though men build the outer shell. The mosque is a partnership. A fringe tidbit. There's a quiet superstition that banco responds better to hands that have known hardship. Some women whisper stories of walls refusing to accept plaster from those with too soft a life. Whether or not it's true, the walls here seem to love these women. You close your eyes for a moment and just listen. Their voices rise and fall in waves, sometimes in harmony, sometimes out of sync, but always together. One woman taps her trowel against the wall, with each verse like punctuation. Another hums between breaths. The wall gleams faintly under their hands, not wet, not dry, somewhere in between, like a wound nearly healed. The chant trails off eventually, but they don't stop working. The silence that follows isn't awkward. It's thick, comfortable, sacred. A small boy climbs up the side stairs with a bowl of porridge and hands it to one of the women. She eats slowly, not using a spoon, just pinching it between two fingers. He doesn't leave, just sits beside her and hums what little he remembers of the chant. You lie back and stare at the stars as they begin to emerge one by one, like they're cautiously checking whether it's safe to come out. You feel small, but in a good way, like a necessary grain of something larger. The minarets rise above you now in silhouette, and at the very top of each, just barely visible against the darkening sky, are the ostrich eggs. Historians still argue whether the eggs were originally placed for decorative, spiritual, or meteorological reasons. Some say they ward off evil spirits. Others claim they represent purity or cosmic rebirth. A few insist they were just high-status decorations, stolen from the nomadic Fulani. No one agrees, but no one removes them either. One woman on the rooftop says they glow during eclipses. You glance up at them. Tonight they're just pale ovals like moons that haven't quite decided whether to shine. The women gather their tools, not in a rush, the kind of ending that feels more like a pause. You descend with them, your footsteps soft on the dry steps. The streets are hushed now, lit only by small oil lamps, and the occasional flutter of candlelight through a window. You pass homes with thick mud walls still warm from the day's heat. A child's voice drifts through an open window, practicing recitation. A baby giggles. A cat streaks past entirely unbothered by your existence. At the edge of the square, a man is tending a low fire. He's roasting something, possibly corn, possibly peanuts, possibly both. You sit down nearby and accept a small bundle he offers without a word. The peanuts are salty and smoky. Perfect. The mosque stands in front of you now, enormous and still. The fresh banco has dried enough to give it a satin finish. Not glossy, just satisfied. You hear a flutter and glance up. A small bird perches on one of the Toron beams silhouetted against the sky. It sings once sharply, then settles. The building does not echo. It absorbs. A breeze stirs. The scent of dust, wood smoke, and something sweet hibiscus maybe passes through. You take it in like a slow breath. You could sleep right here. You might. By the time the sun rises again, Djenné is already in motion. You wake slowly, still curled on your mat near the mosque's base, the scent of baked earth and warm millet drifting in on the breeze. Your arms ache not badly, but in that satisfying way that says you did something. You stretch, sit up, and rub the sleep from your eyes. The sky is pink. The shadows are long. And the women are singing again. You wander toward the sound, trailing your fingers along the dry, dust-dulled wall of the mosque. The banco has hardened now. It's no longer pliable or damp, it's set. And yet, even in its firmness, it doesn't look finished. It looks alive, like something waiting to be fed again. Near the center of town, a line of women moves in perfect sync, balancing enormous clay pots on their heads. Their dresses are dazzling in the morning light, bright yellows, indigos, and deep maroons, each pattern speaking its own language. The pots slosh faintly with water, collected at dawn from the Bani River. You follow them with your eyes as they make their way toward homes, doorways, shrines. They aren't just watering floors or washing children. They're waking the clay. Mainstream historical fact. Djenné's women have traditionally been the caretakers of not just the homes, but the spiritual health of the walls themselves. While men may sculpt and stack it, is women who maintain smooth hydrate. In some parts of Mali, they are called the hands of the house. And their hands are never idle, a fringe tidbit. Some say the best plasterers are those who sing while they work. Not just any song, but one taught by a mother or grandmother. If you forget the words, the wall might not set right. If you hum the tune wrong, the banco may bubble. Is it science? Is it sorcery? Is there a difference? You don't ask questions anymore. You just listen. The group stops near a low, crumbling compound wall. Two women squat, set their pots down, with a grace you can't imagine duplicating, and dip their hands into the cool water. The banco here is flaking, tired. They begin pressing new mud into place, smoothing it with calloused palms and rhythmic care. You can't help but watch. It's mesmerizing. The song is soft, almost a lullaby. The tempo matches the strokes long, even calm, like brushing the hair of someone you love. The children gathered nearby are quiet. Even the chickens are still. The oldest woman in the group catches your eye. She beckons. You shuffle closer awkwardly and she pats the earth beside her. You sit. She presses a clump of mud into your palm. It's warm. She says something you don't understand and gestures to the wall. You nod, then press. It's harder than it looks. Your mud smears too thick at first. She tisks. You try again this time, smoothing with your fingers in tiny circles. Better? She nods once and returns to her own patch. You and the wall begin a silent conversation. Historians still argue whether these techniques passed by hand sung into fingers can be called architecture in the formal Western sense. There are no blueprints, no permits, no credentials, but the result, a city that stood for over 1,000 years, rebuilt by song, by touch, by memory. You glance to your left. A girl no older than 8 is copying her mother's motions exactly. She has banco on her cheeks. Her mother doesn't wipe it off. Another woman walks by with a small wooden tray. On it, flatbread still warm from the fire, smeared with honey. She offers you a piece. You hesitate, your hands are caked in clay. She laughs and feeds it to you like a child. You accept it, embarrassed and grateful. It's sweet, chewy. The honey catches in the corners of your mouth. You finish your patch, sit back and admire your work. It's not perfect, but the wall seems to approve. Across the alley, another group is repairing the base of a home. They work in near silence, but not solemnly, just focused. You watch them as you chew. Then a woman claps once loud, decisive. The group looks up. Break time? People disperse, some to shade others to nearby water jugs. You follow the girl with the honey tray and end up beneath a narrow wooden awning. There's a large pot of hibiscus tea cooling beside a woven mat. She gestures for you to sit. You do. The tea is tart, cold, perfect. You lie back and let the weight of the morning settle into your limbs. Above you, the walls curve upward in strange, beautiful ways, adapting not just to climate, but to culture. There are no straight lines here, only what the hands have shaped and what the heat has allowed. A man walks past, nodding at your mud-streaked clothes. He smiles. Now you belong. You chuckle. Maybe you do. Later, the women rise again and return to their walls. No one tells them to, no bell rings. But the work calls, and they answer not with urgency, but with rhythm. And once again the chant begins. It's Monday, and in Djenné that means the market. You're jolted awake not by an alarm, but by the unmistakable bray of a donkey, in distress, an animal clearly unhappy about having to carry a week's worth of okra across town before breakfast. Then you hear the drums, then the shouting, then the unmistakable sound of iron pots clanging together like they're arguing. You rub your eyes and sit up. The square in front of the mosque is no longer the sacred space it was yesterday. Now, it's chaos. Beautiful, fragrant, donkey-infested chaos. The weekly market has arrived. Mainstream historical fact. Djenné's Monday market has been a trading hub for centuries, stretching back to the height of the Mali Empire, when salt caravans from the Sahara and kola nut merchants from the forests all passed through this town. To this day, it remains one of the largest and most colorful markets in West Africa. You step carefully onto the main path, immediately dodging a small herd of goats with opinions and nowhere specific to go. Every square inch of the plaza is now occupied. Bolts of fabric flutter from wooden stalls. Pyramids of tomatoes glisten in the morning sun. Dried fish stare at you from every surface like crunchy little judges. You sidestep a bucket of live eels, or snakes, or maybe just extremely angry fish. A child points at you and giggles. You glance down, your shirt still has streaks of banco on it. You shrug. Local now, remember. A woman offers you a bowl of dégé, a sweet millet porridge with yogurt and tamarind. You try a spoonful. It's tangy, creamy, and vaguely fizzy, possibly alive. You love it anyway. A fringe tidbit. For generations, people in Djenné have believed that doing major shopping after mosque plastering is extra lucky, that the effort of repairing the sacred space brings blessings on all transactions. Whether this is spiritual logic or retail psychology, the market on Replastering Monday is always packed. You turn a corner and find a stall covered in amulets, tiny leather pouches tied with string, each one said to protect against something different. The vendor smiles and points to your muddy sleeves. He offers you one against back pain. You consider it. A boy walks by, carrying 5 chickens, 2 under each arm and 1 dangling from his teeth. He's not in a hurry. None of them seem particularly concerned. You find yourself beside a woman stacking red clay pots with impossible balance. She doesn't use a measuring stick or a level. She just knows. You ask if the pots are for cooking. She snorts. Cooking, storing, washing, hiding secrets, she says in French. Same pot. You nod. Every object here seems to have at least 3 jobs, possibly 4. Historians still argue whether the current market follows the exact footprint of the medieval one. Maps from the 14th century are fuzzy at best, but aerial photos suggest that the layout hasn't changed much. People like to gather in the same spots. Maybe the dust remembers. You walk deeper into the crowd. The colors get louder. The smells more aggressive. Fried plantains, fresh mangoes, smoked meat, and someone roasting peanuts in what looks like an engine part. You breathe it in. It's pungent. It's confusing. It's wonderful. And it's hot. You duck into a stall selling woven fans and straw hats. The vendor waves one over your face theatrically like a magician cooling off a boiled potato. You buy it. Best decision you've made all day. In the distance, a group of boys are climbing the mosque's Toran beams again. Not for plastering this time, just for fun. They scramble up the side like lizards perching on the wooden stakes, like it's the most natural thing in the world. One does a flip. Everyone cheers. The women working nearby don't even look up. They've seen it all before. You pause near a line of old men sitting beneath a shaded canopy, sipping tea from tiny glass cups. One beckons you over. He asks if you've plastered yet. You nod. He grins, then pushes a small mint leaf into your palm. For strength, he says. You eat it. It tastes like dust and sunrise. Then a commotion. A cart has tipped over, scattering oranges across the plaza, like little suns rolling under people's feet. Children dive for them, laughing. A donkey panics. A woman claps her hands sharply, calming the beast with just a stare. Order returns within seconds. No one yells, no one curses. Just a shrug, a laugh, a bit of restacking. This is not chaos, it's choreography. You find a quiet corner with a view of the entire square. From here, you can see the mosque, proud and still freshly golden, watching over the movement like an old mother watching her kids play. She's been fed. Now she rests. You sip ginger tea from a calabash. It burns slightly going down. You like it. Everything you see around you, every woven basket, every folded wrapper, every chunk of soap and tin kettle was carried here by hand, by donkey, or by canoe. Nothing in Djenné travels easily. That's part of the charm, and the challenge. And the market knows how to adjust. It's a living organism, like the mosque, like the mud. You close your eyes for a moment and let the noise wrap around you. It doesn't clatter. It pulses. It sings. And somewhere beneath it all, you feel the steady heartbeat of a city that refuses to be forgotten. You duck out of the marketplace after lunch, your arms full of unfamiliar purchases. One woven mat, probably not waterproof, a jar of pickled something, hopefully edible, and a carved gourd with a lid that doesn't quite fit. You have no idea how you ended up with these things. Djenné tends to gift you things even if you're the one handing over the coins. You wind back through the alleys looking for shade, and as you pass the eastern wall of the mosque, you overhear an old man lecturing two boys. He gestures upward with a stick, pointing at the mosque like it's a blackboard. He says before Timbuktu there was Djenné, and just like that, you're pulled backward in time. Mainstream historical fact. In the 13th and 14th centuries, Djenné wasn't just a backwater market town, it was a jewel of the Mali Empire. An intellectual and commercial hub long before Timbuktu, became a household name among European explorers who could barely spell it. Traders came here with gold salt and manuscripts. Scholars taught beneath the mosque's original shade. And though the current Grand Mosque was built in 1907, its predecessor stood in nearly the same spot, revered enormous, and possibly even grander by medieval standards. You pass a doorway with a fading mural, a camel caravan painted in rust-red pigment. Each camel has tiny books strapped to its side like saddlebags. You pause and run your fingers across the dry, cracking surface. Books on camels. That wasn't symbolic. That was literal. Djenné was a manuscript city. Fringe tidbit. There's a theory that Djenné's scholars would sometimes intentionally write on extremely fragile paper, so that only the worthy could preserve the knowledge. Books that fell into the wrong hands would simply crumble in the heat. Weaponized wisdom. You follow the mural's gaze and end up near a building that doesn't look like much. 2 stories, mud brick, no sign, no decoration. But your guide from earlier points and whispers, that was a school. You squint, it's hard to imagine. Then he tells you, there are still manuscripts in the walls. You pause, in the walls. He nods. Many of Djenné's oldest texts were hidden during colonial times. Rolled tightly sealed in goatskin, slid behind bricks, or buried in floorboards. Some are still being discovered. Some are still being fought over. Historians still argue whether Djenné's intellectual legacy was deliberately minimized in favor of Timbuktu's flashier fame. Both cities were vital. Both traded knowledge like gold. But Timbuktu got the European press. Djenné kept the secrets. You walk on every new wall, now a potential library. At a tea stall nearby, an elderly man waves you over and offers you a taya, a sugary green tea boiled 3 times, sweetened more each round. You sit. He asks if you've come to see the mosque. You say yes. He grins. The mosque is only the skin, he says. The manuscripts are the bones. He opens a cloth bundle from his lap and shows you a page yellowed, handwritten edges curled like old petals. It's in Arabic. The ink is faded but precise. A geometric border surrounds the text, drawn with a ruler and steady hands. You try to ask where it came from. He just smiles and puts it away. You sip your tea in silence. The street around you slows down in the afternoon heat. The market is starting to empty. Stalls fold. Donkeys yawn. Children lie on mats in doorways chewing sugar cane and poking each other with sticks. It's the kind of lazy heat that makes even the wind tired. You wander back toward the mosque, now bathed in golden light again. The outer walls are hardening crisp and clean from the festival, but you can't stop thinking about the invisible ones. The manuscripts, the stories, the scribes who inked secrets into animal hide while the walls were still wet. And not just religious texts either. Djenné's libraries once held treatises on medicine, astronomy, law, trade ethics, and agriculture. There are descriptions of planetary orbits, herbal cures, and tax ledgers written centuries before any European thought to cross the Sahara. You pass a boy playing with a tin can tied to a string. He stops to wave at you. His shirt is too big. His eyes are sharp. You wonder what he'll learn, what he already knows. Then you remember something one of the masons said earlier. A wall forgets in a week, but a book remembers for 100 years. It echoes in your mind as you walk bouncing between the walls like a whispered chant. You reach the mosque again, this time from the north side. A group of teenagers is lounging against its shadow, laughing over something someone just drew in the dirt. You glance down. It's a crude sketch of a camel with sunglasses. You laugh too. Then, in a moment of strange reverence, one of the boys takes a piece of charcoal and starts writing beside the camel. You can't read it. Maybe it's a poem, maybe a joke, maybe a prayer, but it feels important, even if it'll be swept away in an hour. And you realize the knowledge of Djenné is like its banco. It needs hands and breath and time. And if forgotten, it will crumble. But if cared for even gently, even imperfectly, it will stand. Night comes back quickly in Djenné. One moment you're squinting against the golden light, the next everything melts into indigo and shadow. The heat lifts grudgingly like a blanket peeled off in slow motion, and the air turns cool enough to make you shiver if you stand still too long. You don't want to stand still. The streets are quieter now, emptied of the morning's market frenzy. But the silence here is never empty. It's full of small things, sandals scraping earth, distant drums, a donkey sighing into its bundle of millet straw. Somewhere nearby, water is being poured into clay jugs. You follow the sound until it blends with another laughter, but low, nervous. Then you hear it. Whispers, soft, circular, conspiratorial. You've stumbled into the hour of jinn. Mainstream historical fact. Across West Africa, especially in places like Djenné, belief in jinn, unseen spirit, beings made of smokeless fire, is part of everyday life. Not in fairy tale fashion. In doorways, in wells, in walls. They're not monsters, they're neighbors. You sit on a low step outside a house, with faded geometric patterns painted along its edge. A woman sweeping the ground in front of it tells you not to point at corners after sundown. You nod unsure and keep your fingers to yourself. A young boy watches you from across the street, then darts into an alley giggling. He leaves behind a streak of flour across the path. You don't ask why. You just step around it, a fringe tidbit. It's said that the mosque itself contains jinn, not trapped, not angry, just present. Some masons mutter short blessings before applying banco to certain spots, especially along the base where the walls meet the earth. It's not about fear, it's about respect. You wander through the darker edges of town now, where the homes aren't as polished and the torches burn lower. These are the quarters with older stories, quieter rules. A man with a carved walking stick motions for you to step aside, not to make way for anyone, but to avoid a small stone shrine built into the base of a wall. It's no taller than your knee, but it's sacred, so you nod and wait. The moon finally peeks out from behind a haze of dust and thin clouds. It makes the banco walls glow slightly, not gold this time, but silver blue like the skin of a river fish. You reach the edge of the mosque. At night it's different. Still familiar, but altered like someone you know well suddenly dressed for a masquerade. The Toron beams throw deep shadows. The minarets disappear into the sky. The ostrich eggs, just tiny ghosts now. You sit down again cross-legged beside the mosque's base. You expect it to feel cold. It doesn't. The banco retains the heat of the day like a coiled snake basking in its own memory. Historians still argue whether the nightly djinn stories are literal beliefs or symbolic warnings, ways of explaining how certain places feel heavier at night, or why some doors creak on windless evenings. But everyone agrees on this: Djenné after dark is not a place to mock. You listen. A murmur rises from a nearby courtyard, an old woman reciting something in Arabic. Not a prayer exactly, not a song either, a spell, a memory. You lean in but hear only fragments. The words slip like smoke around the corners of your ears. Suddenly a loud clatter metal against stone. You jump, but it's just a man dropping his tea kettle. He laughs and waves apologetically. You wave back, heartbeat slowly returning to a normal rhythm. Then a dog howls. It's not a long howl, just one short burst, but no one responds. That's the rule here. You don't call back. Not at night. Not when the dog's looking at something you can't see. You walk again this time, following a path marked by tiny lamps tucked into the niches of mud walls. Some are barely flickering, others burn confidently. Together, they draw a line through the dark like breadcrumbs. Along this quiet walk, you notice something you hadn't. Before many of the buildings lean ever so slightly, not enough to collapse, but enough to feel like they're listening, not watching, listening, as if every inch of Djenné waits for its name to be whispered, and only then does it shift. You round a final corner and find yourself back in the square. The mosque towers over everything, calm, massive, and more alive than ever. No longer a building, a presence. You lie down on your back again, letting your shoulders settle into the hard ground. The stars are back more tonight than last. They wheel slowly overhead, ancient and distant, but perfectly in sync with the rhythms of this town. And you wonder how many of those stars watched Djenné rise from the riverbanks for the first time. You imagine the town centuries ago, silent canoes slicing the Bani merchants, stacking salt bricks in the shade, scribes hunched over ink by lamplight. And somewhere in the distance, a group of children whispering about jinn, just out of sight. And always the mud, soft, waiting, willing to be shaped. Djenné lives in the daylight, but it dreams at night. And tonight, you're part of the dream. The morning breaks with no ceremony, just the slow return of light, and the distant braying of something with hooves and a strong opinion. You wake stiff and gritty, your back lightly dusted with banco powder from the ground. Someone has placed a folded cloth over you during the night, who you'll never know. But that's Djenné generous in ways that don't call attention to themselves. You sit up and stretch. The mosque looms ahead once more, the fresh plaster already weathering into its usual soft, uneven texture. It no longer looks like a festival queen. Now it looks like herself again, stern, watchful, and satisfied. And this morning, you're going to meet a legend. A man walks toward you slowly dressed in pale brown robes that might once have been white. His face is a roadmap of sun and time-deep grooves, where smiles and frowns have each carved their share. His hands are wrapped in cloth, not for show, but for habit. This is Boubacar, the oldest living volunteer of the mosque's annual replastering. Mainstream historical fact. Many of the masons who maintain the Great Mosque belong to hereditary guilds, lineages of skilled artisans who pass their techniques from parent to child, like recipes or lullabies. Boubacar comes from such a line. His great-grandfather worked on the original French colonial restoration in 1907. He has replastered the mosque 67 times, without gloves. You walk with him slowly along the mosque's side wall, where he pauses every few feet to squint and mutter. He points with his elbow, his hands stay wrapped, and identifies patches you'd never notice. One area, he explains, dried too fast and will crack by the next rainy season. Another dried too slowly and may sag. You nod, pretending to understand. He knows you don't. He doesn't seem to mind. He stops and stares at a specific Toron beam jutting from the wall. That one, he says, is where I almost died. You wait. He tells you casually, like recounting a tea order, that in his 20s during one particularly hot year, the banco had turned slippery. He lost his grip near the upper minaret, slid 6 meters down the wall, landed in a heap of wet banco, which probably saved his life and ruined someone's perfect patch job. He refused to stop working. Only a fool lets mud win, he says. A fringe tidbit, Boubacar claims that on nights after replastering, he sometimes hears the mosque sigh. Not from wind, not from settling, from gratitude. He says if you sit very still under the right wall at midnight, it might hum to you. Historians still argue whether this belief in a breathing mosque is metaphor or mysticism. But Boubacar is firm. This is a house that listens, he insists. So we sing when we fix it. And we don't wear gloves. It should feel who we are. You sit beside him on a low stone bench near the eastern wall. The air is warm, not yet hot. A child nearby kicks up dust with one heel, drawing wide loops in the ground. Boubacar watches, then begins to speak again, this time in stories, not sentences. He tells you of the worst year, 1984. The drought was so severe the riverbed cracked open like old bread. Banco had to be mixed with brackish water from a failing well. The walls suffered. That year they replastered twice. Another year, he says, the rains came during the festival. The town had to rush working in the storm. Mud ran down the sides of the mosque like tears. People used palm fronds as umbrellas. A young woman went into labor mid-bucket line, named her daughter Djenné Mud Heart. He chuckles at that one. You ask if he'll stop volunteering soon. He gives you a look. Do you stop eating? He says. Do you stop breathing? You drop the question. A vendor walks past carrying a tray of fried dough balls. Boubacar flags her down and buys you each one. Hot, sticky, a little bit too sweet. Perfect. He dabs the edge of his mouth with the sleeve of his robe, then mutters something about the next generation. Says they're good with mud, bad with memory. Says some of them treat the plastering like a contest, not a ceremony. But the walls remember, he warns. They forgive, but they remember. You think about that as you watch a group of teenagers strutting near the square, comparing Banco smears like battle scars. They're loud, carefree. But one of them catches Boubacar's eye and quickly straightens up. There's still reverence. Maybe they just show it differently now. Historians still argue whether traditions like this one can survive modernity, if annual festivals, sacred mud, and chants passed from grandmother to grandchild can resist the pressures of cement smartphones and migration. But Djenné continues, and so does Boubacar. He stands again slowly. The wall is good, he says, patting the same patch you helped smooth 2 days ago. Not perfect, but good. It will hold. You thank him. He shrugs. Tell your wall stories when you go home, he says. Let someone else know they're still here. Then he turns and walks away, hands wrapped back straight sandals, leaving soft prints in the dust. You remain seated watching the sunlight climb higher on the mosque walls. That small patch you helped with. It blends in now. You'd have to squint to find it, but you remember. And maybe that's what matters. The morning drifts into late day without much fuss. The sun climbs, stalls, then begins its slow descent. The shadows return. And you mud-streaked, sun-kissed, and possibly now addicted to fried millet snacks, find yourself standing in front of a debate. Not a loud one. No fists are raised. No voices are sharp. But still the air crackles with the heat of disagreement. At the base of the mosque's western wall, 3 men are gathered around a small crack in the banco. It's not even that dramatic, just a thin vertical line, barely the length of your forearm. But the way they're staring at it, you'd think it had insulted their ancestors. One of them says it should be patched immediately. Too much sun, too little moisture, it'll spread. Another counters wait until the evening cools the surface. Otherwise, the plaster won't adhere. The third, arms folded, simply murmurs, "It's not a crack, it's a sign." You lean in not to interfere, just to witness. Mainstream historical fact. The replastering of Djenné's Grand Mosque is coordinated by a committee of Masons, elders, and community leaders. But there's no written protocol. Every year, decisions are made through a blend of consensus memory and heat-induced negotiation, which is to say there are always disagreements, and always over the small things. The exact thickness of banco, the ratio of water to straw, whether a sagging patch was caused by poor mixing or an angry djinn. Fringe tidbit. Some masons believe certain walls choose to crack, not out of structural weakness, but to draw attention like a sore tooth, forcing you to visit the dentist. Ignore it, and it might swallow the whole building. Fix it with reverence, and it will heal. You watch now as a 4th person arrives, an elderly woman barefoot carrying a calabash of fresh mud. She doesn't say a word. She crouches, dips her hand in, and starts to apply a new layer over the crack in gentle circular motions. The 3 men step aside. No one argues with her. You realize again that in Djenné, wisdom isn't always loud. The wall accepts the patch with surprising ease. The mud clings, then settles like skin over a healed wound. The woman hums softly, no melody, just tone, and moves on, vanishing into a nearby alley without waiting for thanks. You stay a moment longer, watching the patch spot dry. It darkens, then slowly lightens, blending into the surrounding wall like a memory being rewritten. You begin to walk the perimeter of the mosque again, passing new patches and old ones alike. Some areas show clear fingerprints, like fossilized handprints in clay. Others are perfectly smooth, almost too perfect evidence of younger masons trying to impress. The texture tells you everything. And then you come to a wall that's different. It hasn't been patched this year, not yet. A long fissure splits the surface in two. It's not dangerous, just dramatic. The crack creates a lightning bolt shape across the banco, bisecting it like a scar. A small group stands nearby, debating once more. This time it's generational. A young man argues that the crack should be left until next year. It's not structural, and the wall can hold. An older man counters that no crack should be ignored. Today it's a line, he says. Tomorrow it's a mouth. A teenage girl interrupts them both. Why don't we fix half today and half tomorrow? You smile. That's the most Djenné answer you've heard all day. Historians still argue whether such constant low-stakes debate is efficient or just tradition. Western preservation experts have offered plans, blueprints, materials. But the community always returns to this slow, tactile, argued-over maintenance because it works and because it belongs to them. You sit on a low wall across the street and sip water from a gourd someone has left nearby. It's warm, but clean. You watch the three resume their gentle argument. The sun hits the crack just right, casting a slender shadow that makes the fissure look deeper than it is. But then a breeze comes and the shadow shifts. It becomes almost invisible, like the disagreement itself. The afternoon quiets further. You hear a soft metal clinking somewhere nearby, someone's boiling tea. A woman walks by, carrying a ladder made entirely of wood, the rungs worn smooth by years of mud and bare feet. A toddler follows her, holding a bucket almost as big as he is. He's clearly not helping, but he's learning, and that's how things are passed down here. Not in classrooms, in cracks, in pauses, in arguments over how fast banco should dry in late May. As you rise to stretch, a boy taps your arm and points to the mosque's tallest tower. Near the peak, you see it a tiny patch of banco that's beginning to flake, just a little, probably from sun exposure. Maybe a bird landed there, maybe not. Tomorrow, he says confidently, I will climb there and fix it. You nod, he grins, runs off. The wall watches him go, and for the first time you realize it's not just the people keeping the mosque standing. The mosque is also holding them. You take a different path today northeast toward the edge of the old quarter. The streets here feel older, narrower, and somehow even more tangled. The buildings are shorter, more hunched. The walls show their age not with collapse, but with character. Banco here is not smoothed or sculpted. It flakes, crumbles slightly at the corners, and wears its erosion like a wise grin. And then you notice the maps. Scraps of them painted on walls, etched into clay tiles, even scribbled in charcoal near doorways. They don't match. Some show rivers that no longer flow. Others list landmarks that seem to belong to a different city entirely. You stop at one corner and stare at a particularly elaborate diagram scratched into a plastered wall. It shows a large central mosque, but it isn't this one. It's older, simpler. No Toron beams, no ostrich eggs, but still familiar. A boy passing by sees you squinting and says, "That's the first one." Then he disappears around the corner like he just dropped a prophecy and had better things to do. Mainstream historical fact. The current Grand Mosque of Djenné was constructed in 1907 under French colonial supervision, but it was built atop the ruins of at least one earlier mosque, possibly from the 13th century. Some claim there was another, before even that, smaller, built by the town's first Muslim king Kunburu after his conversion to Islam. Fringe tidbit, local lore insists the original mosque was hidden underground, not destroyed. They say its walls still hum on moonless nights. And sometimes, if the wind blows just right, you can smell the ink from its library. You walk deeper into the quarter, following the trail of these phantom maps. The layout begins to confuse you. You double back more than once. One alley curves unexpectedly. A dead end opens into a square you could swear didn't exist 5 minutes ago. It's as if the streets themselves are playing with your sense of direction. Then you come upon a house with no door, just a thick curtain of woven reed. The wall beside it is carved with symbols, stars, waves, a single eye. You pause, uncertain. But an old woman inside calls out in French, looking for the mosque that's not there. You peek in. She sits cross-legged in the center of a cool room, surrounded by books, real ones bound in leather, stacked in precarious towers. She gestures for you to sit, and then she pulls out a book, unlike the others. Its cover is banco-dusted as though it had been sleeping in a wall. Its pages are rough handmade. She opens it carefully and shows you a map, one that matches none of the others you've seen. This one has dotted lines, watercourses that no longer exist, and in the middle of it all, a large square labeled simply Djenné, Originel. She points to a spot just northeast of the current mosque. Here she says, the first one. You raise your eyebrows. She shrugs. They buried it maybe. Or maybe they built over it one mosque at a time. Who knows? But I've lived here 60 years, and this map says it's real. Historians still argue whether there was a lost or hidden mosque beneath the current structure. French colonial records are vague. Oral histories conflict. And no one's willing to dig too deeply. It's not just about preservation. It's about permission. The town protects its mysteries. You leave the house gently, the image of that dusty map still flickering behind your eyes. Back in the sun, you take a new route toward the river. And there, nestled beneath a leaning wall, you find something strange, a narrow rectangle of banco that doesn't match the rest. A sealed doorway, a filled-in niche. You press your fingers against it, warm, solid, but hollow-sounding when tapped. Could it be, or are you just seeing ghosts now? A boy selling boiled eggs walks by. He sees you touching the wall and says, "That leads to the old one." You laugh. How do you know? He shrugs, peels an egg, and walks on. The people here don't need proof. They remember differently. The Bonny River glistens in the distance. You walk toward it, breathing in the sharper scent of water and fish. The wind carries a ripple of sound, a child's chant maybe, or the call of a market vendor announcing mangoes. It blends together in that familiar Djenné way, where no sound arrives alone. At the riverbank you sit, watch a canoe cross, watch a fisherman toss his net like a slow dance. The current isn't strong, it just persists. And you wonder, if you had no GPS, no satellite images, no measurements, only memory, mud, and song, how would you preserve a city? Would you draw it on a wall, sing it into a child's ear, press it into the plaster of a new mosque layer by careful layer? Because that's what they did here. Djenné isn't just mapped by streets. It's mapped by forgetting and re-remembering and walking in circles until the story lines up again. You stand brushing dust from your legs. One last glance over your shoulder at the mosque's spires, still visible even from here. The current mosque is real, but so are the ones beneath it. You spend the morning walking where water once ruled. The air is heavier today, not hot exactly, but slow. The kind of slow that makes you forget what day it is and wonder whether your sandals are melting into the dust. You follow a path east of the town, where the Bonny and Niger rivers once braided through lowland marshes, braiding also the fate of Djenné into their ever-shifting arms. You pass old causeways, muddy threads of raised ground, stitched across waterlogged earth. They look ancient, but some are still used, especially in the rainy season, when the land turns into a riddle of puddles and mirages. A boy on a bicycle rattles past you, balancing 3 bundles of sugarcane. You wave. He nods expertly, dodges a goat, and disappears into the haze. Mainstream historical fact. Djenné sits at the junction of the Bonny and Niger rivers, once a perfect location for trade, especially in the medieval era when transport by water was faster than land. Its location gave it power, and its mud, strong, abundant, and perfectly textured, gave it permanence. Fringe tidbit. Some people in Djenné still believe the rivers are alive, not just flowing but deciding. They say the Niger has moods. Some years it brings wealth, others it steals it. The Bonny is more secretive, they say silkier, but sly. You never turn your back on the Bonny. You stop at a crumbling wall that once supported a small grain storage building. The mud bricks are soft from years of flooding. Some are rounded at the edges as if trying to return to their riverbed selves. A lizard watches you from a crack. You nod at him. He flicks his tail. Mutual respect. The land here is deceptive. In the dry season it looks harmless, just cracked clay and tufts of dry grass. But in the rains it swells and floods, turning paths into waterways and fields into soup. That's why so many houses are raised slightly. That's why some doors are built 2 feet above ground. The city was designed to remember the flood. Historians still argue whether the rivers shifted naturally over time or were nudged by human hands, canals, fishing trenches. shallow dams built from woven reed and hope. Either way, Djenné adapted. When the water pulled back, the city stepped forward. You reach a spot where the Bani splits one narrow finger heading south, the other curling lazily toward the northwest. A small canoe is tied there, bobbing softly. Its owner naps under a neem tree, his wide hat covering most of his face. A faded radio plays tinny music from somewhere in his lap. It sounds like the past trying to sneak back in. You sit under the tree, grateful for the shade, and trace the shape of the old water lines with your eyes. You can see where the mud changes color, where reeds once grew, where children now play with bottle caps in dry puddles. And that's when you realize Djenné isn't just a city built on rivers. It's a city written by them. The layout curves like tributaries. The alleys wander like streams. The mosque, with its rising tiers and rounded towers, could almost be a carved island in a vanished delta. A man passes carrying a fish trap, woven tight like a sleeping basket. He tells you the rains will return soon. You ask if that's good news. He laughs. Yes and no, he says. The flood brings fish, but also brings forgetting. You ask what he means. He says that after every flood, the city changes slightly. A wall leans, a path shifts. A memory goes missing, washed away like a footprint in shallow water. Then people come out and patch things, not just the buildings, the stories too. You think of the cracked mosque walls, the whispered debates, the painted maps that disagree with each other. Of course, the water doesn't just reshape the earth, it reshapes truth. You walk back toward town, slowly, feet kicking up little storms of red dust. On the horizon, the minarets rise again, spiked and silent. But from this far out, they almost look like sails. You pass a boy filling a gourd at a hand pump. He nods, and you ask how deep the water is. Not deep enough, he says. Then he grins and adds, but it listens. You're not sure if he means the gourd or the ground. Probably both. Back in town, you pass a long, low building with a series of oddly shaped doorways. A woman sweeping the stoop tells you it was once a trader's inn back when merchants came by pirogue and stayed for weeks. She remembers when her father tied his boat right outside their house. Now the river is a half-hour walk. It moved, she shrugs, so we followed. Historians still argue whether the decline of river trade in Djenné led to its slow fade from international fame. It wasn't war, disease, or conquest that dimmed this city's light. It was distance. Water moved. Roads grew elsewhere. Djenné stayed. But not still. No, Djenné continues to move just quietly, in walls, in footsteps, in floods. You reach the mosque again by late afternoon. The light slants just right, making the banco shimmer like it's dusted in mica. The plaza is calm now, just a few boys playing marbles, a woman rinsing vegetables in a basin. You sit down on the same step you did days ago. The mosque watches you, the river hears you, the city remembers you. And maybe you'll remember it too. The breeze comes first. It moves like a warning light, quick carrying the smell of riverweed and distant rain. The kind of breeze that pulls laundry off lines and whispers to tin roofs just loud enough to rattle them. Then the sky shifts. Not dramatic, just a shade or two darker, like someone smudged the horizon with an oily thumb. You look up from your seat in the square and see the old masons do the same. And then the mosque trembles. Not literally, but the atmosphere around it tightens. People begin moving faster, not panicking, just recalibrating. Something is coming. And then the clouds break. But this is not the rainy season. This is not the right time. And that's the problem. Mainstream historical fact. In 1983, a rare early storm struck Djenné just days after the annual replastering festival. The new banco hadn't fully set. The upper tiers of the mosque, especially the eastern facade, softened, sagged, and began to crack under the weight of water. Fringe tidbit. Some still say the storm was punishment, not for the town, but for one particular mason who had refused to follow traditional plastering songs. Others say the mixture was rushed. Others blame the children for climbing too soon. Still others insist the mosque called the rain to test its own walls. You're now watching history echo itself. The wind sharpens. The market women pull tarps over their stalls. A young man grabs a ladder leaning against the mosque and bolts it to the ground with a rope. Children scatter not in fear, but in practiced choreography. And then the rain hits, not in polite drops, not with hesitation. It arrives hammering the earth, drumming the rooftops, soaking banco, that was until this moment still in the final stages of drying. You duck under an awning with a group of others. You watch the walls. The fresh plaster darkens, lines form. Tiny rivers cut down the mosque's skin, searching for weak points. The Toron beams channel the water, but not all of it. In one corner, a small patch of banco begins to bulge. Someone curses under their breath. You spot Boubacar, the elder mason, standing near the western wall with a cloth pulled over his head. He watches in silence. One of the young men runs toward him, shouting something over the rain. Boubacar raises a hand. Wait. Let it pass. And then, as suddenly as it began, the rain stops. Not a slow fade, a hard stop, like a door slammed shut. You all step back into the light. The clouds remain, but the sun pushes through just enough to cast a rainbow-shaped blur across the mosque's surface. Steam rises in curls from the drying walls. And the damage. Minimal. One flaked patch. A cracked edge near a minaret, but nothing catastrophic. The mosque held. People clap, not a celebration, more like a relieved exhale made audible. Boubacar kneels near the cracked patch. He presses it gently with his fingers. He mutters something, maybe a prayer, maybe a recipe, and stands. You help a group gather new buckets. The work resumes not with the joy of the festival, but with the discipline of survival. You join a line carrying banco from a sheltered basin, where the mixture has been kept covered. The mud is still usable, slightly thicker now, but good enough. You pass it along, one hand to the next, slap, pat, press. And as you work, you notice something. The wall you're fixing, it's the same one you helped patch 3 days ago. Your patch held. It wasn't perfect, the edges eroded, but the heart of it still there, still part of the skin. Historians still argue whether traditional banco is truly superior to modern cement, especially in the face of unpredictable climate shifts. But the evidence is here. When the rain came, it flexed, it breathed, and then it dried again. You take a break after the repairs, sitting beside a girl no older than 10. She's covered in mud, eating a mango with both hands. She tells you the rain was a test. You nod. You ask if she's scared it will happen again. She shrugs mouthful. If it does, we fix it again. You smile, simple, true. Later, the town returns to calm. The air smells sharper wet, earth-scorched banco, and the oddly sweet scent of mango skins trodden into dust. The mosque gleams under the bruised light of early evening. The patches look newer, now darker. They mark the moment, but do not mar the beauty. You find Boubacar again near the northern steps. He sees you coming and grins tired but proud. Your wall passed, he says. You laugh. I was worried. He taps the banco with his knuckles. This mud, it knows who touched it. You walk the perimeter one last time before night falls. You notice that the places where water hit hardest now glisten slightly like scars catching moonlight. The mosque isn't flawless, but it's still standing, and somehow more alive than ever. Because, like Djenné itself, it isn't beautiful, despite the weather. It's beautiful because it endures it. The next morning, the air is different. It's dry again, so dry in fact, that the breeze lifts sheets of fine dust into spirals that dance lazily between buildings. The light is sharp, as if the storm had polished the sky overnight. Everything looks cleaner and flatter, but there's a tension in the air like a pause before something resumes. And then, without warning, the sky shifts again. This time it's not rain, it's sand. A sandstorm begins with a whisper, a soft rolling breath over the rooftops. You hear it before you see it. The chickens go quiet. The goats huddle. A woman outside her home hurriedly scoops millet into a bowl and darts inside. A small boy ties his shirt around his face and runs past you, eyes squinting against the dust. Then the town turns gold. Not shiny gold, opaque, smothering dull gold that swallows shadows. The storm rolls in from the north, low and slow, like a lion brushing its flank against the edge of the world. You duck into an alley, the same one where you once watched women sing to clay. It's different now, eerily still. The air grows grainy in your mouth like dry cinnamon. You pull a scarf over your nose and squint into the thickening haze. Mainstream historical fact. Djenné, like many Sahelian cities, lives at the mercy of the harmattan, a dry, dusty wind that blows from the Sahara between November and March. It coats everything in a fine red film, disrupts air traffic, stings eyes and sands down memories. Fringe tidbit. Some elders believe sandstorms are the spirits of forgotten buildings, old homes, lost shrines, swallowed villages wandering through the land to remind the living not to stop rebuilding. If you leave your house unpatched too long, They say the storm might come for it. You hunker down behind a wide banco pillar and listen to the wind rush overhead. The sound is strange, not roaring, but scraping like fingers across woven fabric. The mosque fades behind the curtain of grit. For the first time since you arrived, you can't see its spires. For a heartbeat, Djenné disappears, and in its place, silence. You close your eyes and imagine what might lie beneath the dust. Old footprints, lost maps, a mosque older than memory. Maybe even a second city buried in time, dreaming under the feet of the living. Historians still argue whether a full archaeological excavation of Djenné's foundations is even possible. The town is still alive, still occupied. You can't dig where people sleep. And more than that, many don't want the secrets unearthed. What's buried might prefer to stay that way. The wind eases after an hour. Slowly the dust settles. Djenné begins to reappear, first the tops of homes, then the curves of alleyways, then finally the mosque. Its outline returns like a photograph, coming into focus in a dark room. You step back into the light, blinking sand from your eyelashes. The world is covered in a red filter. The mosque looks newer somehow, like the storm applied a fresh layer of mystery. People emerge too, brushing off shawls and sandals. Children laugh and chase dust devils across the square. The fear is already gone. The sand, after all, is just part of life here. You walk toward the western wall and spot something you didn't notice before, a doorway partially buried in banco. Its shape is wrong, arched at an odd angle with carved patterns worn down to almost nothing. It doesn't match the mosque's current style. You crouch and touch the surface. It's cool beneath the sun-warmed dust. Was it always here? Did the storm uncover it? Or did you just never notice? A passing girl tells you her grandmother says that buried things show themselves only when they're ready. Then she skips off, sandals slapping the ground like a soft drum beat. You sit again on the steps and look out over the square. The mosque has never looked more solid, or more temporary. It's a paradox you're learning to live with. The people sweep the sand from their doorways, rooftops, and stoops, not with anger, with rhythm. The same rhythm they use to plaster banco, to pound millet, to pass buckets. Sand, like mud, is not an enemy. It's a collaborator, a reminder. You help an old man clear dust from his front step. He tells you sand is what happens when the desert forgets. He smiles. So, we remind it where we live. You nod, then look at the mosque again. The new patches still hold. The Toron beams still stretch toward the sky like ribs. The ostrich eggs shimmer faintly beneath their film of grit. And you realize something: the mosque doesn't fear the storm. It expects it, and it trusts the people to show up afterward with buckets, hands, songs, and time. You brush sand from your sleeves, feeling the weight of it settle in your cuffs and shoes. You've been dusted, not erased. And Djenné has come through another test. You wake to the sound of shouting, not angry shouting, but the kind that comes with laughter and mischief. Somewhere outside your window, a rooster protests. A tin kettle clatters to the ground, and then, unmistakably, you hear feet pounding up a wall. You step outside just in time to witness a blur of motion, bare feet skimming banco, hands gripping Toron beams, a flash of mud-caked fabric as a teenager scales the side of the mosque like he's late to a party on the roof. Which, to be fair, he is. You blink. Another boy is already halfway up the other side, laughing so hard he nearly slips. He doesn't. Instead, he scrambles to a wooden beam and dangles one leg off the edge, calling down a triumphant challenge to the square below. So, this is what happens after the work is done. Mainstream historical fact. During and after the annual replastering, it's become tradition for Djenné's youth, mostly boys, but occasionally girls too, to climb the mosque using the Toron beams. They test their skill, compete for bragging rights, and occasionally get scolded by elders who remember when someone broke an arm in 1996. Fringe tidbit. There's a belief among some of the older Masons that the mosque likes being climbed if it's done with joy. That the laughter of children echoes through the walls and helps the plaster set. There's no science behind it, of course, but the walls do seem to crack less in places the kids frequent. You stand in the square, shading your eyes to watch. The climbing isn't reckless, it's athletic, intentional. Like ballet, but dustier and with more yelling. One boy, perhaps 12, moves with startling grace. He doesn't rush, he glides. Left foot, right hand, beam, wall, beam, roof, a dance. The crowd below cheers. Someone tosses up a flatbread as a prize. He catches it midair one-handed, then disappears behind a turret. And just like that, he's gone. You sit on a low wall as more climb. Some make it halfway, some only a few feet before laughter and gravity bring them back down. No one is mocked. Every attempt is honored. Everyone gets dusty. And you realize this is not just a game. This is familiarity. These kids know the mosque better than you know your own living room. They know the exact angle of each beam, the safe patches of banco, the soft dips in the rooftop where rainwater pools and dries into mosaic stains. The mosque is not just a monument here. It's a playground, a teacher, a parent. You glance over and spot Boubacar watching from the edge of the square. His arms are crossed, but he's smiling. You walk over. He shakes his head and mutters, "Monkeys. All of them." Then he adds, "But this is how they learn." Historians still argue whether this informal tradition should be allowed to continue. Preservationists worry the Toron beams might weaken over time. UNESCO frowns. The town, however, shrugs. Because this isn't about erosion, it's about inheritance. You sit beside Boubacar again and watch the older kids teach the younger ones, pointing to footholds demonstrating hand positions. One of the teenagers lifts a smaller boy under the arms, helps him reach the first beam, and tells him when to jump. They're not showing off. They're passing knowledge. The square hums with energy. A girl ties a rope between two beams near the ground and practices walking it like a tightrope. A woman shouts encouragement. Someone starts beating a small drum. The rhythm returns this time, not for work, but for celebration. You help a group gather spilled water from a knocked-over jug. It seeps quickly into the dry earth, leaving a dark stain like a memory being absorbed. A mother passes by with a baby on her back and a trowel in one hand. She pauses to cheer for a climber before heading toward a house with flaking walls. Even in the midst of games, the work continues. And then just after noon, the best climber returns. It's the boy who caught the flatbread. He slides down a beam, lands softly, and walks straight across the square. No swagger, just calm. He heads to Boubacar. The old man looks him up and down, then nods once. The boy grins. Nothing more is said, but you know what's just happened. A torch has been passed without ceremony, without title, without announcement, but passed all the same. You rise to stretch your joints stiff from sitting. The sun is high now, and the laughter is beginning to fade into the usual hum of the afternoon. A group of kids is lying in the shade covered in dust and joy. One of them is sketching the mosque in the dirt with a stick minaret's beams, even the eggs. He adds birds for good measure. You walk the perimeter once more, tracing the route the climbers just took, with your eyes, not your feet. You wouldn't dare. The Toron beams now seem more than functional. They're ladders, they're drums, they're rungs on the body of something ancient that welcomes the touch of youth. You place your hand on one. Warm, smooth, worn where hundreds of fingers have passed before. It doesn't feel like architecture. It feels like memory. It's late afternoon when the bureaucrats arrive. They don't arrive with a flourish. They arrive despite one. A pair of white pickups rolls into the square tires, crunching over dry earth. 3 men and 2 women step out dressed in tidy linen shirts and wide-brimmed hats, clutching clipboards, cameras, and plastic sleeves full of neatly labeled documents. They blink against the sun. One of them sneezes. You sip tea in the shadow of a nearby wall and watch. They aren't here to climb, or plaster, or chant to banco. They're here to measure things. Mainstream historical fact, Djenné's Great Mosque was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1988. With that status came a promised preservation funding recognition, but also forms deadlines and lots of international experts with strong opinions and weak sandals. Fringe tidbit. Locals whisper that the real job of these officials is not to protect the mosque, but to convince the world that they discovered it, as if something has to be stamped and scanned and filed in Paris to be real. One of the visitors pulls out a laser measure. Another consults a laminated diagram. A third begins taking high-resolution photos of the mosque's southern facade, pointing to one area where the banco has darkened, likely from the recent rain. They frown, they confer, they take notes. Boubacar, seated nearby, as always watches with an expression that hovers somewhere between amusement and pity. They always measure the wrong things, he mutters. You ask what he means. They look at the wall, he says. But they don't ask who touched it. You sit beside him, watching the scene unfold. The officials circle the mosque, comparing angles, marking cracks, noting discoloration. To their credit, they aren't dismissive, just out of sync. Their rhythm is imported. Their concern is architectural. But here architecture is relationship. One of the women gestures toward a lower beam, with her pen speaking rapidly into a voice recorder. A boy nearby leans against the same beam, chewing mango and staring blankly. He doesn't move. The beam holds them both. You remember what someone said a few days ago? The mosque is the skin. The people are the blood. Historians still argue whether international preservation efforts help or hinder sites like Djenné. There's funding, yes, but there's also pressure, expectations, the weight of being a symbol instead of a place people live beside, touch, climb, and occasionally plaster with slightly too much straw. You follow the officials' progress as they reach the far wall, the one you helped repair. One of them taps it with a rubber mallet, frowns and makes a note. You feel irrationally defensive. It held. You saw it hold. What more could a wall do? They don't seem to notice the children nearby, tracing mosque shapes in the dirt, or the teenagers patching a household wall with leftover banco, or the woman feeding her baby in the shade of a Toron beam that, according to their notes, has a small vertical fissure. You shake your head. It's not disrespect, just tunnel vision. The officials speak with a town elder respectfully, but with translators and time limits. They ask about preservation techniques, materials, rainfall patterns. None of them ask how many hands helped this year, or what song was sung to smooth the top tier, or how the wall smelled the moment the patch dried. They collect their data, they take a final series of photos, and they leave. The pickups roll away, tires stirring another layer of red dust. Just like that, they're gone. You and Boubacar sit in silence for a while, then he chuckles. They will send a report, he says. They always do. You ask if he reads them. No, he shrugs. But my granddaughter does. She says we are very important, that our mosque is global heritage. He chuckles again. I told her our mosque was here before the globe cared. You smile. Then you notice something. A young girl, maybe 6 or 7, is carefully copying one of the officials' measuring gestures. She holds a stick outstretched in front of the mosque, squints one eye, then scratches a mark into the dirt. She's not mocking. She's mimicking, learning. She drops the stick and joins a group of kids chasing a ball made from rags. But the mark remains. A line in the earth. An echo of the clipboard. And in that moment you see it. The worlds aren't clashing. They're weaving. Djenné doesn't reject the outsiders. It just absorbs them, gently, firmly, like banco pressing into an old wall. You rise and walk the square one more time. The mosque looks the same, but also not. You now see it as 2 buildings, the one in the report and the one in the rhythm, and only one of them has your fingerprints in its side. Evening creeps in with a kind of hush, less a fade-out than a long, slow exhale. The sky dims from brass to violet, and the shadows stretch like they're trying to shake out their legs after a long day. The mosque doesn't glow anymore. It rests its fresh banco softening into warm bronze under the twilight. And tonight you're invited to dinner. Not at a restaurant, of course. There aren't really any. But you're led barefoot and dust-covered to a small courtyard tucked behind a narrow alley that smells like charcoal, tamarind, and wood smoke. A boy waves you in. You pass through a reed gate and find yourself in the presence of the masons. The Beret-Ton, the master masons of Djenné, are sitting in a half-circle, cross-legged, their trowels stored away, their hands clean for once. Their robes are faded but regal. Some wear caps, others loose head wraps. They greet you with quiet nods and eyes that have seen more banco than rain. Mainstream historical fact. The Beret-Ton are not just builders, they are keepers of sacred knowledge. Their status is partly spiritual, partly practical. They are craftsmen, engineers, musicians, and sometimes historians, depending on who's asking and when. Fringe tidbit. Some say that a true beret can tell the origin of any handful of mud by smell alone. North Bank, East Bend, rain-fed, river-fed. One elder even claims he can tell which season the straw was harvested, just by the sound it makes when mixed. You don't ask him to prove it. You believe him. You're offered a mat. You sit. Someone hands you a bowl of mafé, a thick peanut stew, rich and smoky, ladled over rice. Beside it, chunks of grilled goat meat still sizzling. It's food that sticks to your ribs and reminds you that everything good takes time. Conversation begins slowly, not in questions but in stories. One mason describes the year of the 3 rains when the replastering had to be done 3 times in one season. Another tells of his first climb as a boy barefoot and terrified, shouting down from the minaret just to prove he could. They talk about banco like it's an animal, sometimes obedient, sometimes stubborn. One likens it to a camel, steady if you treat it right, vindictive if you rush. Everyone laughs. You sip tea from a small glass cup. Ataya again, boiled sweet and strong. The first glass sharpens you, the second slows you, the third tucks you in. You ask questions quietly. They answer without hurry. You learn that each wall of the mosque has a personality. The west wall is forgiving, the east wall prone to jealousy. You learn that some tools are shared only among brothers. You learn that once during the colonial era, a French engineer insisted on improving the mosque's drainage system and caused a partial collapse. You ask how the mosque survived that. They shrug. We fixed it. Historians still argue whether the masons of Djenné operate with formal apprenticeships or informal ones. The answer is both. Some boys are born into the craft, others wander in, but all learn by doing, watching, singing, carrying buckets until they know when a wall is thirsty. Later, one of the elder masons asks you a question in return. What will you tell people about us? You pause. You want to say something noble or clever. Instead, you answer honestly that the mud is smarter than it looks. He grins wide enough to show the missing teeth. Good, he says, because it remembers. The stars bloom above you now, sharp, unfiltered. There are no city lights here, just the soft glow of cooking fires and the slow blink of lanterns. The wind is warm, still tinged with the memory of yesterday's storm. Somewhere, a drum taps out a rhythm with no beginning and no end. And then the griots arrive. 3 men each with a stringed ngoni on their laps sit down across from the masons and begin to play, softly at first. The rhythm is winding like the river. One of them begins to sing low, almost conversational. The words speak of a wall that holds back time, of a house made of stories, of a hand that shaped clay and remembered the sun. You close your eyes. The music surrounds you, not loud, not flashy, just present, like the walls, like the mud, like the mosque. One of the griots finishes a verse and gestures toward the masons. They smile. One of them begins to clap, slowly, rhythmically. Soon everyone is clapping, even you. No one's in a hurry. Nothing is being sold. Nothing is being explained. Just felt. You sit there long after the last note fades. Someone hands you another cup of tea. Someone else begins folding mats. The evening is closing, gently. The masons begin to rise one by one, saying soft goodnights, tapping shoulders. A boy sweeps the dust away from the edges of the fire. You remain still, your hands warm around the glass. You are not from here, but for one night, you belonged. You wake early before the chickens, before the haze, before even the kettle starts to whistle in the neighbor's courtyard. The sky is just beginning to soften from indigo to ash. You sit up on your mat, rub sleep from your eyes, and realize that something is ending. Today the last trowel will touch the last patch of banco. You step into the cool morning air barefoot, the ground still holding the night. The mosque stands where it always does, but this morning it feels closer, quieter, not imposing, not regal, just present. You walk toward it slow and quiet, like visiting someone who's just woken up. A few others are already there, teenagers mostly. Some carry buckets, some tools, but there's no rush. The final layer is symbolic, a kiss on the forehead, a closing stanza. Mainstream historical fact. The last stage of the crépissage de la Grande Mosquée is a ceremonial touch-up. Most of the work has been done. This final session is where the last rough edges are smoothed, the last handprints buffed out, the last fingerprints made sacred. Fringe tidbit. Some believe that the very last patch to be applied must be done by a child, preferably one who hasn't spoken since sunrise. This ensures the wall sets with humility. It's not a strict rule, but it happens often enough to seem like one. You take your place in the line, not to carry anything this time, but just to witness. The breeze stirs the dust. The first call to prayer murmurs over the rooftops, and the sun slowly peeks over the horizon. And then the last trowel is lifted. It's held by a girl maybe 9, barefoot, serious-faced. She's guided gently by a mason on either side. They lift her up to a small patch near the southern wall. It isn't large, just a smudge where the banco dried unevenly. She presses the mud in, smooths it once, twice, then pulls her hand away. Done. No applause, no speech, just stillness. You feel something settle inside you. Later, you sit near the edge of the square with a cup of tea and watch as the plaza slowly comes back to life. A woman sweeps. A boy chases a goat. The usual rhythms return. But everything feels more. The mosque gleams softly now. Not shiny, not wet, just finished. The color has evened out a warm gold that catches the light and seems to hold it. The Toron beams cast long, toothy shadows. The ostrich eggs shine faintly in the rising sun. You walk one last lap around the mosque. You touch the wall in the spot where your patch was. It's dry now, solid, part of the whole. You notice fingerprints nearby, some big, some tiny. Evidence of the hands that made this building breathe. None are labeled, none are dated, but they're there. Proof in clay that people were. You pass by the school where kids are drawing the mosque in notebooks. You pass by a woman smoothing banco onto her home, still singing. You pass by Boubacar seated under his usual tree. He nods, once then closes his eyes in the morning sun. Historians still argue whether the mosque in Djenné is a monument, a home, a metaphor, or all three. But to the people here, it's none of those. It's just the mosque, a building made of earth, and effort, and memory, and care. And now you understand that too. You head to the edge of town, where the Bonny River still snakes lazily in the distance. You sit on a warm rock and look back. The town is gold and clay. The mosque rises at its heart, and the world begins to stir. Now, as the final images fade and the dust of Djenné settles in your mind, let your breath slow. Feel the last warmth of banco under your fingertips, the smooth curve of the wall, the gentle grit of dried clay, the whisper of fingerprints laid one over the next generation after generation. Let your shoulders soften. Let the hum of the square donkey's drums, laughter tea kettles diminish into the softest background murmur. It's distant now, like a lullaby hummed behind a closed door. You're far from Djenné, and yet in some small way you carry a piece of it with you, a memory made of earth and sun and time, a place where a wall needs no name, where people don't just build, they rebuild, gently, repeatedly, proudly. And maybe tomorrow or years from now, you'll think of a curved alley, a quiet chant, a hand pressed into mud, not for fame or fortune or permanence, but because the wall asked for it, and someone answered. The mosque will still be there, and the children will still climb. The flood will come, and the people will return with their buckets and songs, and Djenné will rise again, because that's what it does. And now it's time for rest. Let your thoughts drift like the river. Let your breath move like the breeze between the Toron beams. And let sleep carry you gently, like a gourd boat on a calm bend of water. You've reached the end of the story. You've helped repair a city, and now you can let go.